So what I'm going to talk about, as was said, is this transformation of CRM thinking into CE, customer experience thinking. Really, it's what I like to say is a prequel to the oldest presentations you heard this morning. It assumes that your organization hasn't made quite the decision that are they going to put the investment and the strategic focus on customer experience, and how you, as a change agent for your organization, has to sort of drag along the organization in that direction. Some cases it's easier, some cases it's not, and what I'm going to present is actually a mashup of my greatest hits or greatest flops, however you want to look at it, over the last several years, and some of the tips and tricks and that sort of has helped me over the years to bring organizations along into a focus of customer experience. So, by the way, I go at Banafsheh GH on Twitter, so if you guys want to connect there, I'd love to have this follow-up to this conversation on Twitter once we all leave San Diego, and it would be great to sort of do some mind share there. First of all, I'm going to start with Red Cross. How many of you have had direct contact with Red Cross in some shape or form in your life? A lot of people. Actually, that our data shows that it's a large population within the United States have somehow been impacted by the Red Cross. But you might ask, but you guys do good, that's what you do, and I'm going to talk about all the different things that we do. Why do you care about customer experience? And I'm going to sort of explain why it's also for a nonprofit sector, especially one as complex as us, it's important for us to make that mind shift from CRM or no experience whatsoever, or nothing about the customer, into a customer experience world. So our mission is to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and generosity of donors. In fact, my business card, that's the mission statement behind that you see. And we really, as an organization that is a global organization, we're part of a global family. We are driven by 7 fundamental principles, which are humanity, impartiality, universality, neutrality, independence, voluntary service, and unity. And if you put all of those together and you say, well, any brand that has that, isn't it by definition their DNA customer-oriented, constituent-oriented? Yes and no. So I'll get into that in a minute. But a little bit about our mission. So all this, that mission statement, I want to show you how complex our mission is and why, again, focus on customer experience becomes important. We respond to about 70,000 disasters a year. American Red Cross. I'm not talking about even the big global Red Cross that's out there. Just American Red Cross. And that translates to 225 families every day have some sort of a disaster situation, an emergency situation that we attend to. Most people hear about 2 or 3 of them, the ones that hit CNN, the ones that are on the news channels and the blogs and all. They don't hear about the 70,000 silent disasters that are house fires. There are experiences that go into that, and we have to deliver. We also distribute about 9 million blood products each year to the patients at about 3,000 hospitals and transfusion centers across the US. That is about 40% of the blood supply of the United States. We provide about 400,000 services to the military members, veterans, civilians, and their families. Those are, for example, emergency communications when, for example, we have a military person, let's say they're in Iraq and they have a death about to happen in their family, or they had a death in the family, and we have to connect them to the family and make the arrangements for them to come back to the United States to be with their family during a difficult time. We also deliver training to more than 7 million people a year. That's essentially around first aid and life-saving skills. If you remember, our mission is that we're an enabler. Through everything I just listed, the disasters is basically served by the volunteers, are the ones that show up at your house when you have a fire. There are the ones who get dispatched to Haiti. We also, everything else, all the training, et cetera, we do, we are enablers of the general public, like yourself, to sort of serve the community in a disaster and an emergency situation. So one of the things that I had to do when I first got to Red Cross after my tech sector experience was to get my head around what is a customer at Red Cross? Who is a customer? And in the world that most of us live in, the for-profit sector, it's a pretty easy definition, in retrospect. You as a brand deliver a service or a product to a person or an institution or a business, and in return, they will pay you. They will compensate you for it. But in our case, our customers are also our suppliers. So they are clients. Obviously, they're the absolute customer. They're the ones that we serve during a disaster or an emergency situation. But our financial donors are also our customers because they supply the finances, but we also have to sort of compete, quote, we don't like to use that word in a nonprofit world, but we do compete for your dollar because there really isn't a shortage of good causes out there. The blood donors, we have to attract them. There are other players in the space of blood donation where you can go and actually donate your blood. They're for-profit but in general. So we have to compete in our experience that we deliver with them, and they're also the suppliers of the blood that is part of our mission delivery. We have active and inactive members of the armed forces. We have course takers who are suppliers and customers because they're actually customers because, again, there are CPR classes can be taught in many other places. And we have to convince you that you should come to Red Cross. But at the same time, because you learned CPR, you can serve the community in the way that our mission would like you to. So as you can see, it's a very complex definition of the customer in terms of us trying to attract you and maintain you, and it's so diverse. Each one of these individuals have very different drivers in their life that attracts them to that part of our mission. So why do we care? So why do we care customer experience is important for all these people? Again, isn't it enough that people show up at Red Cross and say, I'm going to do something good, and they're going to walk away feeling good about themselves? Not quite. So why it's important is because the number of charities in the last decade have increased by 60%. Now think about it. Last decade has been the worst economic environment we have been globally in, right? What other sector can you say has grown that quickly in the last 10 years? So it's a very fast-growing sector in terms of causes. If the product and the service is giving the society a cause and a goodwill, that product is growing really, really fast. We also say that the era of Mad Men is over. It used to be that you could put, I mean, this is an eye chart of sorts, but it used to be that you could put your advertisement on your TV, you could put it on newspapers, you could put it on the bus stops, and that was how you got the word out about why you are better than everybody else and why people should come to you. Now, even though the reach, if you see that circle on the right hand, TV ads are much greater than any other channel, their influence is actually lowest. On the other hand, the reach of you and your friends and family is smaller. They only talk to the people around them, not millions of people, but what they say is the most important thing that you hear about who you should go with, whether it's going with Zipcar or American Red Cross as your charity of choice. You rely more on your friends and family to tell you that where you should go and invest your time. Not only that, the influencers, the friends and family, yourself, you guys actually have really big megaphones now. And it has a multiplier effect. So while you're only telling a few people, you also have something called social media. If you have a bad experience, let's say in our blood centers, you will post it somewhere. You will post it on Twitter, Facebook, or if you have a great experience, you will post it. So more and more people will hear how you feel about us. If you go on our website and try to donate money and is a pain in the neck to donate money on a website this day and age, guess what? You're going to tell somebody, don't go there, it's a hassle. If you want to do good, go somewhere else and donate there because it's so much easier to donate. So we care about people's experiences and their relationship with us and what they say about it. And the minimum bar, the lowest bar that we have in that is that we don't want them to feel they're inconvenienced as they're trying to do good. We have to we talked about frictions in the last presentation. We have to get rid of the frictions for allowing people to actually do something good for their community. So in the case of Red Cross, when I joined them about 2.5 years ago, we started to focus on, I'm going to talk about just one of our groups of customers, not everybody else that I'm working on, but financial donors, which is like the lifeblood of any nonprofit when we really depend on financial donors. And the challenge that I saw was the financial donor life cycle was not well defined. Now, it might have been in different people's heads that how an institution donates, how an individual donates, how a small amount, a core donor is what we call less than $1,000 donor donates, how a large, somebody that leaves their will for us, donates. People might have something in the impression in their head, but they really didn't have it, so they couldn't articulate it and say, well, of course, this is what's going to happen when somebody comes to our website, or this is what's going to happen when they see a financial, a relationship manager that is a direct fundraiser. As a result, our moments of truth were not known. So we didn't know where we actually were making or breaking our relationship with somebody in that process of donation, where somebody would say, this was such an awesome experience that I know exactly what I'm donating to, and I know what the cause is, and the process was easy. I'm going to come back, and these are the people, Red Cross are the people that are going to get my donations every single year. Or they might have gone through a process of, oh my gosh, I can't even get my tax papers. At the end of the day, all I want is my tax documents, because that was partly one of the reasons I donated. So if that was painful, you're not going to come back the next year, because it's become an administrative nightmare. We also captured the voice of the donor, or in the world of for-profits, the voice of the customer, only from a brand sentiment standpoint, meaning, do you respect us? Do you like us? Will you donate again, et cetera? But it wasn't so much into what I was talking about, transactions. So when you went on our website, how easy was that process? What was easy about it and what was difficult about it? So we didn't have any kind of data or research or any kind of way of capturing that information. And we had siloed donor impacting initiatives. We were redesigning our website over here. We were redesigning our acknowledgement process over there. So again, going back to the Zipcar presentation, I love that when the statement was made about don't make features, make an experience, build an experience, because those things in the nonprofit world, when you're fixing this over here and fixing that over there, is really you're fixing features, you're not fixing an experience. And then the other thing, which I actually think this is very dominant in the nonprofit world, because most of the limited resources aspect of it, it's a very acquisition. Donor lifecycle interactions, post-marketing campaigns, and post-first donations are not aligned. It's a very acquisition-oriented sector. It's not when you're sort of selling cell phones or renting Zipcar, you don't even think about the experience only in the context of, all right, once I get them, what do I do? I don't have to worry about the rest of it. You have to actually design the experience around what if something goes wrong, and the customer care aspect of it. Who are they going to call? What are they going to call for? And how quickly are we going to respond to them? And how are we going to respond to them? Things like that. So that kind of stuff doesn't really, I've seen this, I talk to nonprofits a lot in a given week, and I feel that that part of the life cycle is always kind of left on its own. So it's important to go from a CRM mindset to a customer experience mindset, is the premise of my presentation. And this is why I think it's where we should go there. A little bit of a history that many of you are probably aware of, and actually the reason I picked this topic is because a lot of people do mix CRM with customer experience, but they still think CRM. And the evolution has been that when you looked at 1980s, there was this all-knowing database. Everybody thought, give me a big data warehouse, I pour all my data in it, and I will stare at it long enough that it will tell me what to do with my customers. It will tell me what to do with my customers, right? There was no strategy behind it. It was this inanimate object was the, sort of the wisdom that was in the organization. In the 1990s, then you started to see the attitude of plug in the machine. So by that I mean Oracle started to show up, Salesforce.com started to show up, Microsoft Dynamics started to show up, Clarify. You had all these great platforms that promised you great CRM capabilities. They still didn't even call it customer experience. They still called it CRM. But the attitudes were, or the selling points were, if you buy one of us, just plug us into the wall and the machine comes on and then magic happens. Your processes get fixed, you get excellent reviews from your customers, money starts pouring in, you can do the happy dance, right? So that was the selling point of a lot of these companies. And what really happened, as we all know, is that 70% of the CRM initiatives failed, and 75% of them failed to impact customer experience in any way. So you're buying this thing, whether it's the database version of it or the application, and there's the word C, acronym, part of the acronym is C, standing for customer, and yet they do absolutely nothing for the customer. So mid-2000, people started to talk the right language, right? It's the business strategy. It's not a system, it's not a database, it's a business strategy. Great, we're getting somewhere, right? Because now people are talking about brand experience. What do I want to deliver? Like Starbucks wanted to make you the second living room, and Mini wanted to give you that luxurious, experience, but in a more compact and cute car. And so people started to talk about experience, and then they said, well, let's go and find out, give this being our brand statement or brand vision, what do the customers want from it? And then once we find out what they want, find out what capabilities do we need, what enablers do we need, what initiatives do we need to put out there to give them what they're looking for. So all those people, process, technology questions started to come up. Well, I think we're starting again. It's not quite there yet, in my opinion, but it's at least the right language. It's not some inanimate objects dealing with our business. It's actually some human thinking goes into this. Right? But just as we start to think coherently about this, then you all of a sudden hear about the social brand, social media. Twitter pops up, Facebook pops up, all of these great, amplifiers that I was telling you about, the megaphones. And so all of a sudden you're expected your brand to be sitting in the middle of all this, what social web is, Facebook, Yelp, YouTube. You're supposed to be all over this. And you are supposed to be speaking a whole different language. You're talking about user-generated content. You're talking about customer sentiment. You're talking about online communities, checking in, gamification. Whole new language starts popping up around you in the last 5 years, maybe even less than that in many cases. So what are you supposed to do with this now, right? So not just as you've begun to think about strategy, chaos comes your way, because these are the platforms that you really don't know why people are doing it. Why are people on Facebook? Why are people on Twitter? What am I going to get out of it? It's so noisy out there, I can't even hear what they're saying. Because there's, when you have, in our case, we have thousands, on a good day, we have thousands of mentions on social platforms. In a disaster time, we get millions of mentions on a given day. How are we supposed to sift through all this and make any strategy out of it, right? So confusion ensues, right? But the reality is, those of us who are in this business of moving the organization from CRM to customer experience, or from wherever to customer experience, invariably, even to this day, I would tell you, you will find organizations somewhere along this continuum. Even though these thoughts popped up in different decades, you still could walk into an organization, when they say CRM, they're thinking a database. And if you are a customer experience person, if you're a CRM, a true CRM person, you might go off and build them a strategy, and they say, I don't want a strategy, I want a database. So you're not even speaking the same language. And so your job is, first of all, to move the organization into a more mature way of thinking about CRM/customer experience. So how do you do that? Where do you start? My recommendation, change the language. So when I first came to Red Cross, I was actually hired in to become vice president of CRM. And what I realized quickly was every person I talked to had a very different understanding of what I was going to do for them. And it was somewhere along that continuum, depending on when they were exposed to it. One person, one executive wanted me to build a database for them. Another one wanted me to bring Salesforce.com for them. Another one wanted me to get them a strategy. So I said, you know what? Let's change my title. My title from now on is customer experience. And actually, within a week, I changed my title. And that became sort of normalized the language a little bit. Because people now figured out whatever it is I'm going to deliver, whether it's a database or Salesforce, all at the end of it all, it is all with the interest of a customer. So changing the language from customer relationship management to customer experience, actually my preferred is brand experience management, is that you go from a strategy where it's led generally by a CMO or a customer care officer or a customer sales officer, a chief sales officer or a chief customer officer, and very tactical focus, which is all operational, to a place that is really your CEO. The highest person in the organization says, the most important thing to me is the brand experience. Make it so. In the CRM world, you're really capturing what you know about the customer by trying to figure out what is their value on your organization, the lifetime value. Not that those metrics are not important anymore. They're very important, but there is other metrics that you should measure as well, which is how do you want your customer to experience your brand, and then how do you capture what they think of your brand, how they value, how do they place. So it's their metrics, not your metrics, because that's what brings them back, is that you gave them value, not that they gave you value. No customer ever comes back to you because they think they're giving you your brand value, right? Generally, as I said, CRM is very acquisition focused, sales, revenues, profits, and those are the metrics. But if you look at more holistically, and I've actually worked for a company that every single person, even the sales guys, were compensated for retention. So gross ads were important, but not as important as the customer stayed. And that was a big trait of any kind of business that's shrinking, right? And as I mentioned, in our case in the nonprofit world, when you're growing at 60%, the whole sector, by definition, your sector is actually, your customer base is actually shrinking because now they can spread around multiple causes and even abandon you. So step one was change the language. Step two is to get an understanding of the customer life cycle. As I said at Red Cross, we actually didn't have a good understanding of what our financial donors go through. So I asked around, nobody could tell me, so I just made up one. And this is it. Aware, learn, donate, confirm, and appreciate, seek help, renew. In many ways, very similar to what I was doing in the wireless industry, with just different labels. So I showed this around, and I asked people, does that sound right? And they said, yeah, that's pretty much what the donors go through. So we at least level set what the donation cycle was like. Then we said, okay, what are the moments of truth in here? What are in each one of these touch points? What is it that we're doing that we think are the most important from a customer or donor experience standpoint that's making them decide they will come back to us next year or again throughout the year, or they say, this is it, I don't ever want to be here. And we defined what the words that you see around it, those became our moments of truth. And we decided to sort of focus on those. As simple as they sound, that acknowledgement and appreciation one, I have been working on this for the last 9 months. You would think thanking people is an easy thing to do. It's not as easy as it seems, because honestly, in the nonprofit world, you have to think about there are sensitivities. Some people say, don't waste my money thanking me, just put it in the cause. Don't send me letters of thank you, just send me an email, that's enough. Other people say, darn it, I gave you $200,000 and all I get is an email. So you have to sort of segment of one that has become very predominant it's very predominant here. It's trying to decide what is the appropriate level and form of thanking people. Who puts the signature out there? What is that signature? You would think that's an easy call. But if you look at different nonprofits, it ranges from the CEO of the nonprofit to some celebrity to the people who are actually beneficiaries of the cause. There's no rule to it, but which one actually draws you closer and more intimate to the organization, feel like you're really appreciated for what you did. So very few focus on very few moments of truth, but very complex ones. Then you capture the voice of your customer. So now that you decided what the life cycle looks like, what the moments of truth are, what are they saying? What do they want? What do the donors want? Have you heard this expression? The kids say, something is my jam. Now, has actually nothing to do with jam, the preservative. It has to do with music and jamming, but it's an expression that kids use, and I thought it works here, so I'll throw it out there. A lot of people are saying social media is the jam, right? There's this thought that social media, if you listen, forget your focus groups and forget your surveys, they're dead. You don't know how many white papers I've read that said surveys are dead. Just listen to social media. Okay, yeah, I would tell you social media is the jam, and it's great because it gives you real-time feedback and engagement. It gives you leading indications of issues. It gives you competitive intelligence, a very specific. I can look at what people are saying about Cancer Society's practices and what they like about it, and what they don't like about it, and make sure that I don't make the same mistakes or actually take the learnings from it. It's great for ideation. You can, before you actually go and implement something that might, rub people the wrong way, you could actually throw it out there as an idea and see how people react to it. And you can outreach to new segments. There is this idea that the people who are in social, actually that's changing quite significantly now. People that are on social platforms are younger, sort of more tech savvy. That's really changing. So we have to actually adjust to that. But it does allow you to get to new segments. So it is the jam, and if, again, most of us and all of us are in this room in customer experience business, we all know that we had to spend a ton of money in our business for focus groups and surveys, and the problem with those were, a lot of times, it would take a long time to get it out. There are large investments. By the time you get the results and figure out what you focus on, it's time to run the next survey, and so you were in this constant loop. Again, I'm not going to say abandon those at all, but I'm saying that it was a much more difficult, we were all in a much more difficult place in trying to extract the voice of the customer. So what I would say is social media is the jam, but it's not the full breakfast, because you still get the emails from your customers that tell you exactly what they liked, what they didn't like. Mostly they tell you what they don't like. You still get your contact center, CRM, has tons of notes from the types of things that people have called in for and they've had issues with. You still have to do those surveys and focus groups, and I'm going to say why in a minute. But as you can see, there's still, you can't abandon. Actually, I got 9 minutes, so I have to move really fast. Richer text and context is where the surveys are. I think you can't get that on social media. You still can get very specific on your questions. You have to be aware of your channel bias, because when you go home, this will be the homework. If you look at any of those channels I mentioned, different brands have different slants and biases in each one of those channels. In some cases, your email might be where the negative sentiments come through. Your surveys is where the more neutral sentiments come through. Call centers is where the negatives and the issues come through. For every brand, that's different, but I guarantee you, if you look at those channels closely enough, you will see a bias. So the message here is you need to take it holistically. You can't just focus on social media or your call center or the emails to say, what is the sentiment of my customers around my transactions and my experience? You have to be segment appropriate. As I said, there are different segments using different kinds of these platforms. You can see Red Bull is not Red Cross. They're very different customers. And so where we go for social media will be very different. How we interact with them would be very, very different than the Red Bull would. And so we ask for a well-balanced voice of the customer framework. So I'm not going to go through this again given the time, but it's really the message of don't abandon your old legacy ways of getting voice of the customer. They're still valid, but layer them with social because it gives you more real time, more sort of leading indicators that you didn't have the luxury of in the past. Then, step 4, build a strategy. We talked about that. Start with the vision, go to your customer wants and needs through the voice of the customer, then figure out what your capabilities, enablers, initiatives are. This one is actually key because a lot of the organizations, step 5, how do you implement the strategy? Some organizations that I've worked for, they have the appetite of doing a wholesale change of direction with customer experience. Everything from products to services, to bills, invoices, everything was up for redesign. And the organization had the appetite to invest in that kind of a wholesale change successfully, fortunately. Some organizations, they don't, and you have to start smaller, like I did with the financial donations. So my advice would be start with sort of scoping the landscape and figuring out what initiatives are out there already that are trying to achieve somewhat what you're trying to achieve, and sort of infiltrate. And make sure if you're redesigning your e-commerce, go in there and figure out of all your findings from the voice of the customer that they have actually accommodated some of your requirements, some of the requirements of your customer, and it's not a sort of internally focused enhancements. Social media just takes it to the next level. I say don't be intimidated. It's just the evolution. Where your customer used to call you, then they started to send you emails. Now they're getting on Twitter and telling you what you think. So it's just the evolution of how they're getting there. So as such, think of CRM and the customer experience across it as bigger than those platforms. Think of them as your mobile strategy. Think of your, when people used to call into the call center and somebody would pick up the phone and answer their issues. Today, they're going to social media to do that. So how is that different? Social media is now actually part of your CRM infrastructure. I'm going to actually move really. How much time do I have? Because I do want to leave for questions. 3 minutes. OK, so I'm going to actually pass through really fast and just structuring the social media aspect of it. Because I'm saying don't get intimidated, is look at your legacy of how you dealt with other platforms in the organization, like email. When it came to surface that there is such a thing as email, you didn't go and set up an email department. What you did, you recognized it as a channel, as another channel that people came through, and you set up within your marketing, your sales, and customer care, which are all customer touch points, a strategy function where they determined where does this new channel fit in the mix, and then you had an execution channel where they actually operated it for you. So in the case of email marketing, somebody figured out where email fits into the marketing mix. Another person was responsible for getting the emails out and measuring the results, et cetera. So think of social that way as opposed to we need to go and set up a social media listening post and see what people are saying about us. And then what happens usually in that case is you get a jack of all trades, master of none sitting at your social media desk because they can absorb this, but they can't really lend any kind of expertise to your customers. And that's it. So I want to leave really room for questions.
Sorry. Thank you. How does your strategy change from, I imagine you're dealing with like a $75 donor as well as a $200,000 donor. How are you kind of navigating those areas with this strategy?
Great question. It's actually, we've talked about it in a few presentations before this, the omni-channel, where we have arbitrarily divided up the smaller donations, the more of the consumer channels, email, direct mail, direct response channels, and web and text. These are the small, and then more of a face-to-face relationship for the larger donors. What you really find out is the donors actually, there are people that go on our website and donate $20,000, which we consider a large donor, that don't want to talk to anybody. They just want to maintain that relationship. So our task is to listen to that behavior and sort of react to it. I'm a true believer of segment of one. We used to tend to put people in buckets. Now there are tools out there that actually allow us to see what a single person is doing and sort of put our messaging and marketing and handling their issues based on their preferences and behaviors that so some explicit and implicit statements from them. That's it.
Follow-up question.
Sure.
How are you capturing those preferences? So you were saying there's the $20,000, $200,000 donor who doesn't want to be called. They just want an email, and you're going to frustrate them if you actually do get in touch with them because it's a waste of money. How are you capturing that information?
We're actually building that infrastructure as we speak, not to sell, make a pitch for a specific vendor. We've selected actually a Primo as our marketing CRM platform that has as a part of its capabilities a preference center. So when you go online, for example, you can actually tell us how do you want to be communicated to, down to the level of, I want to get newsletters for blood donations on email, but I want my money asks to come in direct mail. So you can actually set that up based on their preferences, and we're building that infrastructure. It's not in place right now, but we recognize that.
You said that one of your measurements, your key measurements, is how your customers experience your brand. What are the details behind that? How do you actually measure that?
Yeah, so retention is a big one. So because it is very important for our donors to come back. We want them to become actually a recurring donor, one that says not just comes back like every 3 months or at random times, but they sign up to actually donate direct deposit, direct debit, I should say, every month to donate. So how does that number go up and down? Again, the preferences in terms of people opting out of communications with us, it shows that they've lost interest, and we're not communicating the right information for them. So I think retention is actually a big metric for us. And